Welcome to Down to Dunk. I'm your host, Andrew Schlecht. We're part of the Athletic Podcast Network. With me, hardly ever, on Tuesday at 11:51 p.m., it's my good friend, Alex Speers. Alex, what's up?
Almost a Wednesday pod for you. It
So
will
close.
be in a few short minutes.
In about 9 minutes, we'll be doing the Wednesday pod.
Wow.
The Timberwolves won tonight. If you want to hear more about that, you can listen to the Athletic NBA show. Fred Katz and I break it down. We also have Kelly Eco on, and we talk about the Rockets and Spurs off seasons, which I think are really fascinating. We had a really good Jalen Green conversation, which I think like you could almost like slide Josh Giddey's name into the same type of conversation where this like upcoming like extension class is so interesting and complicated. And Josh is one of those, and we'll get into that certainly here on this show. But Jalen Green is equally as complicated for Houston, and so that to me is going to be like a really interesting thing that happens this offseason. Like I'm sure Cade will just get the max, but like there's a lot of those guys that you thought were heading for like an easy max extension that is not quite as easy as some would have assumed.
Yeah, and they have to deal with Şengün as well.
Yeah,
So
that's like part of the conversation we had is like, can you really, if you're Houston, give Şengün and Jalen Green maxes this summer? Like, can you really do that? And if you're the agent of either one of those guys, you're probably like, listen, let me make the case. Like, let's set the precedent for who gets maxes. And like, you can probably make an easy statistical case for both of them to get it. So like Houston, this is why when you hear them like in talks for trading for another star, this is probably why, because it's like the options are probably give those guys a max or trade for a star,
yeah,
or I guess you could take Jalen Green to, restricted free agency, but he's probably going to get the max from somebody and just walk, or you're going to have to give him the max next summer. So it's just their team building gets very complicated very fast. And like what would uncomplicated is if like Jalen Green could be as good as he was in March for like a whole year, then like it's an easy yes on the max for him. But I don't know that everybody believes, what he did the last, month of the season is actually what he's going to do for the rest of his career.
yeah, and it wasn't even until the end of the the year.
Oh, was it? Yeah, it was at the very end of the year, and without
No,
Şengün.
but I mean, even like if you look at his last 10 games, he played the exact same he played at the beginning of the season.
Oh, right. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
It's
it's really scary.
super complicated. But Sam Presti spoke today to the media. 2 hours. I had it clocked at 2 hours and 31 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay.
Beginning to end, which is interesting because and I assume this was like intentional to make it shorter because it was, so the 2 years prior was 2 hours, 15 minutes, 2 hours, 20 minutes. And we were even, taking prop bets before he came into the room saying like, over under 2 hours and 15 minutes is what Joe Masato set it for. And many people took the under. I did not, especially after he usually does like a 30-minute just speech essentially. And a lot of it goes to the fans and, to what, happened throughout the season. And he usually does 30 minutes on his own, but he only did like a minute. And then we were all so shocked that he was just taking questions like from the get-go that like none of us were ready, because we're all just kind of sitting back, ready for him to just speak for a little while. And he didn't. Then I thought, okay, this is for sure going under. And then it did not. He spoke for a long time. I'm still trying to process some of this. We'll process it on this show, and then we'll process it some on Friday as well as we kind of dig through it. But how much of it were you able to consume? And then, what was like, we can start with what your main takeaway was.
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting year just because going into it, I expected it to be even more ridden with riddles than normal, and I think it was because, you know, in these past couple of years, there was like a clear, like, philosophical angle that he was pushing or that
Mm,
he wanted to get across. And I
mhm,
don't really feel like that's really needed anymore. I mean,
mhm,
people kind of know what they're doing. There are bigger questions now, and you can ask him about it, but we're now to the point where he's not going to like spill his guts on his philosophy. I think he was much more willing to do that when he was talking about justifying, tanking for those seasons. Like he was much more willing to talk about the thought process behind that. I mean, he wrote a whole letter about it basically. But now we're to like the nitty-gritty of like how do you turn this contender into a championship team? And I think that's a much more like personal question, like that he doesn't necessarily want to tell you the answer to, because he doesn't want to reveal that information. He's not going to tell you that he's like this player or that player is not going to be on the team next season. He's not going to tell you what type of player they're going to go after. Like you're not going to get any of that. And so as a result, I think a lot of this stuff this year was worded in such a way where you could believe whatever you wanted. And to prove this, Thunder Focus on Twitter just had a question at the end of it. Hey, what did you take away from Presti's press conference?
mhm.
I swear, Andrew, I went through. There were equal number of people saying, "Well, I guess we're running it back," as there were people saying, "Well, I really think we're going to be aggressive now." An equal number, like people saw the exact same quotes, came away with the complete opposite opinion on what it meant. And I think that was by design. Like there were things that he said that could make you feel one way or the other throughout that entire talk, the entire 2 hours.
Yeah. What did you think though?
Um, I mean, we could just jump into. Well, let's get the fun stuff out of the way. Let's start with the fun stuff, which was
Well,
Gordon Hayward.
I was wondering I mean, I guess that's the fun stuff. What do you think? Did you come away thinking that they would be more aggressive or more stand pat?
Um, I guess the quote that stood out to me the most was actually when he was talking about Giddy,
Yeah.
and they were asking about his fit, and he said he won't have to fit on this team because this team is over. Mentioned the team will look completely different next year, and on extension talks, they don't have to do anything this year as they have another year. Now, I don't know how much of that I believe, but just
Where
that
where
idea
where did you read that
that
quote from?
was Rylan that tweeted
Okay,
that.
so like the context for that,
Yeah.
because I think people are taking that out of context. What he's saying there, and the way that he explained it in that moment was that we think the way that he thinks about the team is that it is always changing and evolving, even with the same people on it.
Hmm.
And so inevitably, because of the growth of the players within the team, there's no way that they will be the exact same team next year.
Right.
And so like that was the way that he was explaining it. Not that like this team is going to change totally and like we're going to add like so many new players and they'll add new players. Like inevitably they will add new players to this team. But I think like that quote is being taken like taken out of context because that is not the way that he was explaining it in person. And like there's extra context that he was adding that wasn't included in that quote that probably does make it seem like Josh is gone to some people if you read it. If you just read it, just isolated like that.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't necessarily take it as like Giddy's gone,
Yeah.
but more. I just thought it was an interesting phrasing. And like if you do run back a team, I get that it's like a different team, even if you add like a piece or two here. But
Yeah. Yeah.
we know who like the top three guys on the team are, and they're going to dictate how the team plays.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not
For sure.
that different. I
Yeah.
mean, I get what you're saying, but
Yeah. That is what he was saying though. Like that is
yeah,
the
yeah,
context of how what he was wanting to convey in that moment.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, then the other one, I guess he got asked about OKC's window,
Yeah.
And he said, I like to think we're always aggressive. Some people may conflate action with aggressiveness.
Hmm.
He says they're not bound to any one way of doing things. This is all from Brandon Raybar, by the way. Pressy says they've shown in the past that we'll make some pretty big decisions. Agree. There's some things we may explore that no one ever knows about. He says they explore additions to the team, but put all possibilities through a decision making filter. And then he had his quote, we'll go as fast as we can, but as slow as we have to.
Uh-huh.
Um, I do think that quote probably sums up my opinion on this press conference the most, which is that like I don't think we got any clarity in terms of what they're planning to do.
Hmm.
I don't think he really like dropped any real hints as to like
Yeah.
what they're thinking right now. Because that quote right there allows you to believe whatever you want. We'll go as fast as we can, but as slow as we have to.
Yeah. I
That could
think
mean anything.
well, I think we've now entered an era of Thunder basketball that you could make moves now where you feel really good about who the like he talked about like the base of the team is really good. Like they feel really good about the base of the team. Like I think if the problem is like it has to be the right move and it has to be the right players and it has to be the right situation and it has to be, you know, if you can acquire them, does the price make sense? Like there's so now we enter in like you can start factoring in those things. Like, does the price make sense? Does the player make sense? Does the contract make sense? You know, like you can start like actually factoring in those things where they could go push the button and be like the favorite next year. Like those things could happen. But if like the right player doesn't emerge, like they're not going to force anything to happen because there's probably a lot of scenarios where they do make a trade and it makes the team a lot better. There's also probably situations where nobody is available that they want, um, and they can't like price somebody away that they want, and they more or less run it back. You know, I think like we've entered in that era of like there's no need to force anything to happen, but if something comes available that like just makes so much sense and the price is right, like yeah, you go do it. Um, which
Well,
definitely leaves everything up to interpretation and, like, definitely leaves things, like, more open-ended than they have been in a while.
yeah, and I'll respond to that in a little bit because I have something prepared for that. Um, but I just a few more things. We talked about an arrival versus an appearance and the difference. I know this won't go over well, but we had an appearance, Andrew. I feel like he should have defined arrival a little better initially. If I had known they had to make the playoffs twice in a row before it'd be even considered a rival and winning 57 games and being the number one seed wasn't enough to qualify as an arrival. Oh my gosh.
Did you see what he said before he said that?
What did he say before that?
He said, "This will not be received well."
Oh,
But
yeah, yeah. I said this.
oh,
This I
okay,
know this
okay.
won't go over well. And then he had the quote. Now, this was a true riddle. Okay.
Mhm.
You'll have to explain this one to me because I don't think it makes sense. He said, you can pick the lock or you can crack the code.
Yeah,
Now, to me, that implies that picking a lock is easier than cracking a code. It kind of puts lock picking on a lower pedestal than code cracking. But
yeah,
as someone who watches the lock picking lawyer on YouTube, Andrew, as someone who has played plenty of RPGs where lock picking is a skill, I do feel like he kind of put it down a little bit. I
yeah.
think lock picking is a skill; it's not luck. So I don't really know what he was talking
Well,
about right
he
there.
but then he followed it up with you, you pick the lock, you're stealing it. You crack the code, you own it. That's what he said.
Crack the code, you own it.
Dude,
That would still be stealing it. That's hacking.
yeah, I don't know. Anyways,
Anyways, that riddle, not a fan of. Didn't make any sense to me. Um, he. So, can I talk about the Gordon Hayward thing?
well,
Because I
yeah,
actually did
yeah,
think it
we
was
can get there.
interesting.
I think part of what he's trying to say is like we're not gonna like skip steps or like try to do something to subvert like what we've been doing. Like we are going to do this on our own terms. You know, is what I think he means by that riddle. Is like we are going to figure this out, you know, on our own terms. And he talks so much today about not being a conventional team. Like they've gotten to this point with being unconventional, with the way that they build their team, the way they traded for all these picks, and the way that they've acquired players, and even their draft strategy with players. Like they've gotten here to this point. And I think part of what he's trying to say is we don't plan on changing the way that we operate. Like we didn't like get here to now start acting like every other team does, is like what he's trying to say. And it's like they plan to try to figure this out on the same path that they've been on, is the way that he tried to say that in probably like 100 different ways, but like the what he's trying to convey and what he tried to convey over 2 hours and 31 minutes in so many different ways, because he was asked so many philosophical questions over the course of that time, was that like we are going to do this the way that we've been doing it. Like we're going to stay on the same path. So you can take that for however, again, it's like a Rorschach test. Like you can take it however you want, but
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't mean anything for the fans' perspective because we don't know what he actually means by that practically.
well,
Because
I think that we can take some of the stuff that he's done so far and apply it, but
I mean, we could say,
um,
okay, they're not going to trade for Trey Young, but we already knew that. Well, like, yeah, they're not going to make like
yeah,
that type
or
of
they're not going to acquire a big man that doesn't do the things that Thunder players do.
sure.
So like I think there are definitely ways that you can apply it, especially like when you look at like who they may select in the draft, or who they might go after in free agency if they use free agency, or who they may go after when it comes to trade. I think you can definitely apply things to it, where like a lot of people aren't doing that though. Like I know that we're doing that, and like a lot of the people that listen to this show are. But like you just like explore Thunder Twitter or like Reddit for like 5 seconds, like you can tell that most people, there are a lot of people that are not applying like
Y-
the lessons that need to be learned.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, they'll see this team invest so much in a player like Giddy, who absolutely has Thunder qualities in terms of his like playmaking ability,
Hmm.
but does not play with physicality, does not play defense, does not spread the floor. We like there's such a narrow range of what we think a Thunder player is when the reality is like if you look at the rest of this roster, like defensive identity is a huge part of being a Thunder player. So I don't think that you just because a big man doesn't spread the floor, they can't be a Thunder player, you know?
Yeah, I didn't say that spread the floor is the
No,
only.
no, I know, but there's not like you can be a Thunder player while not having every Thunder quality in the world because we've seen it with Josh Giddey. They heavily invested in a player who doesn't play defense consistently night to night, is not physical night to night, and yet they heavily invested in him. Meanwhile, they're harping on defensive intensity, physicality all the time, talking about it like every chance they get, going back years at these press conferences. So I don't think you can rule out certain big men just because they don't like. I'm trying. Well, I mean the name that we always talk about, or I've been talking about to some people online is like young Al Horford, because
Mm.
that theoretically is like kind of the perfect big man for this version of the Thunder.
You talking about getting a
Like
time machine?
what?
You talking about getting a time machine?
No, I'm just saying, like, if you actually wanted like the perfect Thunder big man for this current team, Al
Hmm.
Horford's probably it because
Yeah.
especially his like first year in Boston, because that's when he started taking threes more. You
Hmm.
remember how good he was against Joel Embiid guarding him? So good that
And
Philly like
Giannis.
stole him away. And
And
Giannis,
Giannis. Yeah. Oh,
like,
I mean, he's absolutely, and the fact that they tried to, and the fact that Presti tried to acquire, he did in fact
yeah,
acquire him once, but like
yeah,
tried to acquire him another time. Like,
yeah.
yeah, I mean that like tells you that there's certainly something there with that kind of big man for
But
sure.
the reality is, like, that kind of big man is so rare. Al Horford is so rare, and so
Yeah.
it like they've shown a willingness to give up some things when it comes to other positions. I think they're going to be as willing to give up some things when it comes to finding like the next big man. I think we get a little too hung up on what we think like the Thunder big is going to be, like the next Thunder big or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is like Chet is the Thunder big, and
Well,
like
yeah,
what we're talking about is like a backup.
but I'm saying like they shouldn't not go get someone who is better than Jay Will simply because Jay Will theoretically fits a lot of what the Thunder wants to do, even though he is substantially worse than whoever this like big man that they could potentially bring in. Like that
Yeah,
doesn't make any sense to me.
I will
Like
say like there is a belief that exists about Jay Will and what he can do. So I
I'm
wouldn't.
sure there is, but you
So
shouldn't put all of your eggs in that basket, which is what they did in the playoffs. That is the only big they were willing to play. They weren't
yeah,
willing to play Kenrich, and he got killed in those minutes. They got killed in the J. Will minutes over and over and over, and they had nothing else to go to. So
mm-hmm.
it's great that they have big beliefs. I love J. Will. They need another big.
Yeah. I mean, I've been on the show many times saying they should go get Flip, who is like does a lot of thundery things, and he's a lot bigger than Jay Will, and could theoretically do the same stuff, but at a higher level. And a guy that you could pick at 12. Jay Will is a second round pick. You
Yeah.
know, and he was a second round pick because he is not the most athletic guy, and because he was not a shooter at Arkansas. And he's really developed that skill. Um, but yeah, I mean I think they could just use another big in general, not even necessarily to replace Jay Will, but like you just need more than two big guys on your team, that you feel like you can play, because they were just never going to play Bismack, and they were never going to play a player
Right.
like him. So like I think acquiring another player like that, and even using your 12th pick to do that, I think makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. Um. Okay. Can I talk about Gordon Hayward now? Is there
Yeah.
anything else you want to talk about?
Yeah. No.
Okay. So I thought his quotes about Gordon Hayward were very funny. Um, his quote, like, so he's very diplomatic. He was extremely diplomatic.
Oh yeah.
He was asked about what Gordon said at his exit interviews, and was, basically said like, yeah, like maybe he was right, like maybe I made a mistake, like yeah, it didn't work out, but he did say we got him to bark, so there's that,
It was
which
really funny when he did. I
which
like kind of couldn't believe he said that, but it was really funny.
which is really funny, and I feel like the subtext of that is like, we literally got him to do one thing, so there's that.
We have that. Yeah, it was really funny. There were a lot of things that Sam said today that was like, oh my gosh, like he's showed a lot of personality today. And this is one like pet peeve I have about this press conference, because like I put a lot of energy into this, like thinking of questions, and like I'm in the room, I'm recording it, I'm putting it out there on the Down to Dunk feed, like I'm putting it out there. And then some people will just put this out there, and they always say this, like, oh, Sam is the master of saying nothing at all. It's like, if you really believe that, like actually go listen to it. And even go listen to what he said last year and the year before. Like it's all archived on this podcast feed. Like he really does say a lot. Now, is it packed in every single word that he says? Is like every single answer packed with something? No, like there's some bad questions asked that get some fluff answers. But like when it comes to like stuff, that is meaningful, like he will deliver. So I just want to caution people from like either saying that or buying that is reality, because like there are a lot of things said in these like 2 hours and 31 minutes.
Um, but I did think it was. I don't know. I guess I should have expected him to be like very. I don't know if you'd say complimentary, but just because that the Thunder organization probably was not thrilled with the way that Gordon Hayward handled his exit interview.
How could you be?
Yeah, and
Like in
so
what way could you be thrilled?
and so I just thought it was interesting how he handled it, and of course, my first thought is like, oh, I wonder who Gordon Hayward's agent is. Out of interest, I wonder who else he represents, and it's Mark Bartelstein, who
Mhm.
happens to be Mike Muscala's agent.
Yeah, I was gonna
Also,
say Thunder
Andrew,
have.
also Andrew, agent for Kyle Filipowski. What do you think about that?
I mean, the thing is, like, the Thunder have a good relationship with almost every like big name agent, including Mark
No, I
Barnes.
I know, but I always think about that stuff when I I just didn't believe him that he really, like, agreed with Gordon Hayward.
Eh.
I
I
I
I
didn't
think he
and
was
the other
being
thing
as, like, kind and diplomatic, like you said, as he could be in that moment, because, like, honestly, what is he supposed to do, you know?
well, here this is kinda what I feel like because, if you don't know, Gordon Hayward's wife after the presser was, like, on Instagram, having some comments,
This is so
and
weird. This
and
is,
wha
like, one of, like, the weirdest and almost, like no, 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 go ahead, go ahead. This is
this is
so
better than Gabriel Deck, I will say, and
oh, yeah.
she said something to the effect of, like, "Gordon told you, like, he didn't really wanna like, that this trade didn't make sense to him." That's what she said, like, "Gordon told Sam this trade doesn't make sense." And the whole time I'm thinking and then listening to how he handled it, I feel like what we're learning, which I think we kind of knew, was that that trade was 100% about clearing cap space.
Yeah, and I've been
And
kind of trying to say that over the
I
last few
know,
weeks.
but and the thing is though, like when you're a number 1 seed, or I don't know what they were at the trade deadline, if your
They weren't
only
number 1
move
before the trade
is a
deadline.
salary dump, like that doesn't look good, okay? We can all agree. If you're just making a salary dump. In retrospect, I think we both agree that is what that was. It was about opening space for this summer,
Yeah,
but you can't say that in the middle of the season. You don't even really want to say that in exit interviews. So you kind of just have to like keep up this facade that and to be fair, we bought into it. We bought into it because we were into that trade when it was made, and we were very excited. Ooh, what is Gordon Hayward going to bring? He's a vet. He averaged
yeah.
15
I mean,
points per
theoretically,
game.
he, like, fits in with and Sam even said this today, like, stylistically, you can see the fit, in so many ways, you could see a fit, you know? And, like, is Gordon Hayward the first player to ever not love the situation that he's being traded into before, you know?
Right. But
Like,
I just think, like, in
all
retrospect, that was kind of the perfect as bad as that trade looks or as bad as that trade felt in the
yeah,
playoffs, as we're
yeah,
seeing him getting minutes over Kenrich Williams, and we're like, "Why is this guy playing? He's not even looking at the rim."
right.
In retrospect, that was kind of the perfect trade for Sam because that was the only way he was going to be able to actually do a salary dump at the
Execute
deadline, free
salary
up all
dump.
this space, but throw people off the scent enough where like Thunder fans wouldn't really be bothered by it like around that time, you know? And so I do think it worked. And I think the fact that he keeps harping on that space gets me excited. The fact that he keeps bringing it up
Yeah,
because that space is only going to be there for so long.
they definitely wanted the flexibility. Like, there was no hiding that.
Yeah. Which is cool, which is exciting.
Yeah.
Much more exciting now than like when we were in the playoffs and it was like, why am I having to watch Gordon Hayward? Um, but yeah, I just thought the whole Gordon Hayward saga was very interesting, and it took on like it had so much more depth than I was expecting, Andrew.
Yeah.
There's just
It
so
is
much to it,
one of the weirdest things to happen, like, with the Thunder in a long time. Like,
and just the way he talked about that trade. Um, I he's I can't find the exact quote, but kind of he was making the point that like I'm going to learn from that trade, bringing a guy in the middle of the season and expecting him to just, seamlessly fit into a team. Um, I just thought it was pretty interesting candor about a very recent trade. I mean, we all know Presti's made bad trades, and I
yeah.
don't feel like we've really ever heard him specifically, like explicitly say that and explain why, you know?
Yeah. I'll find the
And I just
quote.
thought that made it a little unique.
Yeah. I mean, Presti was really I mean, people it's again, like, it's worth going and listening to, but he was definitely, like, very, like, humble in that, like, he doesn't have all the answers. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know that, what's gonna work out or, like, what necessarily, is going to work and isn't going to work, and, you know, I asked him, like, was there anything about, like Casey Wallace's workouts or what you saw at Kentucky that made you think he could contribute this season? He was like, honestly, I never know if a player can contribute, right away. Like he was like very much like willing to say like, I don't know. And he talked about scouting toward the end of it and talked about how he was like, we are all guessing. He was like, we are just all guessing. Like he was like, I genuinely believe that like there's not like necessarily even like one scout that's better than another. Like we are just all guessing. It was very interesting to hear him talk about it because he's definitely gotten a lot of perspective, certainly from like his first time, from his first go around. But it was interesting. And even with that, like I know that quote it's like literally the only thing that ESPN took away from the press conference was like that
Which
quote
one?
about like the headline says like Presti botches
Oh, really?
or something. Yeah. It's like, what is this like crack journalism going on here at ESPN? Like it was pretty ridiculous. But like what he's just trying to say is like I think what he wanted to convey with that specific quote is like he is still learning this current team and like this current iteration of the team with like how they function and like what makes them tick and things like that. And he's like he felt like something that he learned this season is that it's really hard. It was really hard to add somebody from the outside into this team. And Gordon was
I think specifically mid-season.
Yeah, mid-season. Yes, not that he wouldn't do it in the off season.
Right.
He never,
Yeah,
but he did insinuate that like adding somebody mid-season was part of the reason why it was really hard for Gordon. And some of it is like maybe there was some resistance, on Gordon's part, to be part of this team. There was obviously something not right. Because like we have all seen Gordon Hayward play basketball, many times before. At least if you just watch the Thunder, you have seen Gordon Hayward play basketball a lot. The way that he played basketball while he was here, that is not that was not Gordon Hayward basketball. It was very, very strange. So yeah, I don't know. It was one of the weirdest sagas in the history of the Thunder. He should have been able to do more than that.
Some other things I thought were interesting. I'm now reading from Joel Lorenzi. Regular season, I think you win with the dribble. Postseason, I think you win with the pass.
Yeah.
Referencing Dallas and how good of a passing team they were in the playoffs.
We talked about that a lot today.
Yeah.
Like how they need to become a better passing team. Which also makes me think there's no way that they're trading Josh Giddey because it's like, and he also talked about how Josh Giddey was like he's like I can't remember if he said like 95th or 98th percentile in like passers in the league at his size, but like he definitely mentioned that, several times, the passing stuff.
Yeah, but at the same time, like so much of a team's passing identity is driven by their best player. Like Dallas is a good passing team because Luka is a generational passer.
Mm-hmm.
Like the skip passes he makes. There was one tonight where he threw it cross court and it was just like perfect into Derrick Jones Jr. hand. He didn't even have to move. Like
it's really good. The whole team though, like you watch that Dallas team, even like Derrick Jones is like bought into it. Like Derrick Jones is throwing good passes.
Yeah, I mean, they move the ball really well. I don't know if you're ever going to get to that level with like that level of a passing team without someone leading the team that's that level of passer.
Yeah.
Like Shea is just not that level of passer as like where Luka is, and neither is Dub.
Very, very few people are.
Very few.
Yeah, but they can be better than they were though.
They can be better, but a lot of those passes, like to get wide open corner threes, like those are tough passes. It's not like you just suddenly learn how to do a cross court skip pass and perfectly place it. Like that's a really hard thing to do.
There's one player on the team that can do it,
but he doesn't do it. Like we and that was part of so rarely.
That was part of what he was talking about today. It was like they have to learn how to use him better. And that's just what he was saying today. That's part of what Sam was saying today. It's like he talked about like the mixing board again when he referenced like Lou Dort and how figuring out like the right amount of Lou Dort for this team this year was like part of like what made everything so much better, and it made, he said you can't have everybody turned up to 11. And this was like a part of like the Giddey conversation that he was talking about. And so again, like I left that press conference thinking that Josh Giddey is going to be a big part of what happens, with this team over the course of the next year. And like I
We'll
kind of
see.
felt that way going into it, and I felt more so that way after listening to him today.
There's nothing he was going to say that was ever going to be negative about Giddey, though. Like, if he wanted to trade him, he would have said the exact same things he said today.
Maybe.
What is he going to say? Yeah, it just doesn't look like it fits right now.
No, but I hear you. I'm just telling you. I mean, I said this even the other day, even before he talked. That I felt like
No, I know.
setting in a particular direction, and I'm just saying that like the things that were said today doesn't make me think any different about that at all.
Sure. In case people weren't paying attention, I did think a funny moment was there was this like letter to the editor in the Boston Globe in 1993. If you don't know, Sam Presti wrote telling them that the Celtics need to tank and draft Jason Kidd, and he was asked about that today. And he said, quote, "I was acting like a Twitter user back in 1993. I was frequently wrong, but never in doubt. I had 100% confidence in my opinion with 10% of the information."
Yep.
To which I would respond, "Hey, you're the one who has all the info. Just give us some more and we can be smarter. It'll be easier for us. You're the one holding all the information back from us. If you want us to have more than 10%, then we can say smarter things,
I think he might say the opposite of what you're saying if you said that to him. It's like, stop acting like you know everything and chill out. It's probably what he would like to say to Twitter users, not let me give you some more information. But
Well,
that's
what he should do.
It was pretty funny.
Okay. Do you have anything else to say about Presti?
Oh, I feel like I'm mentally completely worn out, and I'm sure there will be other things that I'll go back to. Oh, I did think like some of his stuff league wide was interesting. Like he touched on, and I thought this was kind of fascinating viewpoint about like the in-season tournament paired with like the increased physicality down the stretch, and he cited several statistics about how like the first half of the season Stars played more than they have in a long time. Then after that 65 game mark, it was like 71% of Stars played the rest of the season, which is less than it's been in a really long time. And then you get to the playoffs and it's even less. And so he didn't insinuate that like there needs to be action now, but he's like, it's something that we have to really watch, is like whenever you make these tweaks to everything. And he said he was a big proponent of the in-season tournament, but like the fact is like that January was crazy the Thunder had to play. And the amount of back-to-backs, the amount of games, they played 17 games in the month. I mean, it's just a lot. And so he talked about how like there were some consequences this season to all that stuff, and like that's just something to watch for. And he thought that like the medical staff for the NBA, like the lead docs for the NBA, needed to be more in on like schedule making and like if this is like good and like healthy for our players, because it's obviously about the Stars playing, but it's more about like the Stars playing now. Like the Eastern Conference playoffs were just a disaster because the Stars didn't play, and a lot of that was injuries and a lot of calf strains, and if you're the medical staff for the NBA, I think it's something that you definitely have to look at. So I thought that perspective was really good. And it's like it's cool to like hear the perspective of like an individual GM too on like league wide matters, because a lot of times you just get to hear either Adam Silver talk about it, or you get to hear like the NBA talking heads talk about it,
Yeah.
and not like somebody who's actually like in it with a team. And so that I thought was good perspective on that, and something to definitely watch for moving forward.
Yeah, his comments on the officiating in general were interesting.
Yeah.
There was that kind of, I don't know if I would even describe it as veiled shot, but the allusion to the Lakers free throw discrepancy
Uh-huh.
that I thought was interesting, because he
Yeah.
was talking about how some games they just could not get free throws,
Yeah.
especially after the rule changes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Andrew, are you ready?
Yeah.
Great.
Ready.
So on Monday, I guess it was Sunday, Andrew had McKelly on.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they intended to or not, I feel like that episode ended up becoming the case. You guys made the case for running it back. Okay. And I was listening to it.
Did not set out to do that.
I know you didn't. I had a feeling you didn't set out to do that, but that was the impression I got by the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see
And
it.
I was furious. Furious listening to it, just yelling at myself. So I wanted to give the opposite case. I wanted to give if that was team run it back, hashtag team run it back.
Mm-hmm.
I want to give you the case for hashtag team aggro. And so I came up with the 5 top reasons
Team
why the
aggro.
Thunder, team aggro, why the Thunder should be aggressive this summer. Okay. And these are in no order, not by order of importance.
Well,
okay.
we'll see about that.
I did come up with 5. Okay, so number 5, I'm starting, Andrew, by taking us back a couple of years when we were talking about tanking. Okay, remember we spent episodes and episodes making the case for tanking.
Yeah.
I mean, this was all the way. We started this probably back in whether that would have been like summer of 2019, basically, where we thought we were about to tank, and we started hot and heavy, hitting it every single episode. And I would say that like the central thesis that we were trying to get across was that tanking gives you the best odds as a small market team to create a championship level team.
Mm-hmm.
But we were very honest, saying that what it doesn't do is give you the quickest path to 42 wins, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if your goal is to be competent as soon as possible, probably not the best option. If your goal is to make the playoffs as soon as possible, probably not the best option.
Mm-hmm.
I bring that up to say that I think there's a similar thing between building a contender versus building a championship team. And my question for the Thunder is, are you building a contender or are you trying to build a championship team? Because you can absolutely run it back, be a good team again, be a contender. And maybe things break right with matchups, you win a championship. But does that approach give you the best odds of winning a championship? In the same way that we believe tanking increased the championship odds for OKC, if the goal is to win a championship, you will likely have to make some sort of significant trade.
Mm-hmm.
Now, sometimes those are star trades, like the 19 Raptors with Kawhi, 20 Lakers with AD. Sometimes they're role player trades, 15 Warriors with Iggy, 21 Bucks with Drew, 22 Warriors with Wiggins, 23 Nuggets with Aaron Gordon. 24, you have Boston made multiple role player trades with White, Porzingis, and Drew. The Mavs made multiple role player trades at the deadline. In order to actually win and not just be a contender, recent history tells us you eventually have to put the finishing touches on your team in some way through a significant trade. And I think this is even more important in this era of parity where the margins between these teams are so small. There's always going to be teams that are willing to go all in, like Dallas did this year, to increase their odds of a championship. And so if you're not making those moves to increase your odds of a championship, are you really building a championship team or are you just building a perennial contender?
Mm-hmm.
Point number 2. This one, probably the most controversial, Andrew. Dallas's success in the playoffs does not mean OKC was close. Now, let me explain myself. The playoffs definitely showed us that OKC matches up well with Dallas. You know, it was a close series. A few plays here or there could have swung it. But just because we feel that OKC matched up pretty well with Dallas and Dallas is now doing well, that means nothing for how the Thunder would potentially have matched up with Denver or Minnesota in next year's playoffs. And the issue for me is that Dallas isn't some juggernaut. This isn't the Rockets losing in 7 to the Warriors where how you match up with the Warriors is really all that mattered during those seasons. I don't
Sam
want to.
touched on this today.
Did he really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I don't want to assume that this.
He agrees with you, by the way.
Good. I don't want to assume that this team is close just because they lost in 6 to one of the good teams in the West. This team is still completely untested in the playoffs against any other good team in the West. I'm not running it back because I match up well with one of the good teams in a conference where things are pretty flat at the top and matchups matter so much. That's not a good reason, in my opinion, to run it back. We've seen the rock, paper, scissors aspect to these West matchups. The goal should be to build a team that is a tier above those teams, which you accomplish by adding more talent. I mean, that's why. Well, actually, I'm going to get to it right now, Andrew.
Yeah.
My third point, for all the OKC fans who bemoaned the 2016 cap spike, including me, it sucked. It was very unfortunate. Here's the good news. OKC has their own version of a cap spike this summer. How often has a number 1 seed, 57-win team had this much space and flexibility with assets? The Warriors in 2016 didn't look at a close finals loss to the Cavs and say, ooh, maybe we should just run it back, make some moves around the edges, an approach that would have kept them as a contender, an approach that still might have resulted in another ring, as we saw in 2022. But they took advantage of the unique opportunity with the cap spike, maximized their window, made themselves a tier better than all the teams around them. Now, that's an extreme version of this scenario, but the point is that legitimate contenders don't get this opportunity. This is extremely rare. They're really the only contender other than Philly, arguably, with this level of flexibility. And I really think punting on that opportunity by running it back would be a massive missed opportunity because it's not going to happen again to this degree. Now, the cap is rising, yes, but it's rising for everyone. No contender is as flexible, has as much of an ability to increase their championship odds as OKC does right now. Fourth point, Andrew.
I mean, that's true. It's just, I mean, when it just comes down to like, are the right guys available and do they want to come to your team?
Here's the thing, Andrew. Do they want to come to your team? I don't really care about that part. Is the right guy available?
Weirdo situation that we just talked about.
We can't keep saying that they have like the greatest asset base in the history of the NBA.
No, I'm
and say
talking
that
about
they
free
can't
agency.
go get any single guy they wanted.
I'm talking about free agency. I mean, like Kevin Durant went to. You brought up the Warriors. Like Kevin Durant went to the Warriors. Like he wanted to go to the Warriors. He chose the Warriors.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm not really talking about free agency. I'm talking about making a move through trades.
Okay.
I
mean, I'm just telling you, like, if you bring up that example, like but also like do we have who? Do you have a list of who?
That's not my job. That's Sam Presti's job.
Oh my gosh, Al.
It's true. It's true. You can't back out of this by saying, "Ooh, tell me who the exact name is and what the contract you're going to offer and what the trade is."
Are there actual candidates though? It's like that's all I'm asking for.
Yes, there are actual candidates because they have every pick.
No,
they have so many picks. They can make an offer to anyone they want. They have $35 million in space.
Good players. Like there's a lot of teams that won't move their good players even for like 5 picks.
I guarantee you that whatever player you're thinking of in your head, there is a price on that player.
I'm just asking you to name one player. I'm
Anyone.
not saying that I even disagree with you. I'm just asking you to name a player.
Just choose any player. Choose any player.
No, I'm asking you to.
Larry Markkinen. They could offer a package that could absolutely get him this summer. Now, I'm not saying that that's my like first choice, but I'm naming a name. Yeah. You absolutely could get him from Utah if you paid them enough.
I don't think that that's true. Number one, that you absolutely.
Do you think Danny Ainge is going to turn down 6 first-round picks and Case and Wallace?
Maybe.
Really? No, that would be the biggest haul in the history of the NBA. He's not turning it down. They can get anyone they want. I'm not buying this thing where they have 17 future first-round picks, but oh my gosh, we don't know what we're worried we can't get the guy we want. They can offer anything. They can get anyone they want.
I mean, I don't believe that's true, but like you can go ahead.
All right, number 4. OKC has so much flexibility that they could bomb this summer and it wouldn't matter. They could blow this. They could bring in someone who they think is going to fit perfect. They don't work out. Maybe they get hurt. Maybe they decide to stop playing basketball like Gordon Hayward. Guess what? Doesn't really matter, at least compared to how it would matter for other contenders. SGA is signing a Supermax next summer. J-Dub and Chet are signing rookie max extensions next summer. The next 2 years could be completely derailed by making a big swing that doesn't work. And at the end of it, you have 3 near or current all-stars locked up for multiple seasons. They have the flexibility to get off of bad contracts. When Dallas made their trade deadline deals, it had to work. When the Suns traded for KD, it had to work. When Milwaukee traded for Dame, it had to work. Those teams traded away their futures. When any of these capped out teams use the last of their remaining assets to improve their teams this summer, it has to work. That is not the case with OKC. The stakes aren't nearly as high. It's not zero risk, but it's also tiers below the risks that accompany these types of moves for literally any other team in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Last point. There's no guarantee OKC is better next season. OKC just won 57 games. They were the number 1 seed in a tough Western Conference. They're super young.
Mm-hmm.
They have rising young stars. That does not mean they're going to be better next season. First, health. The Thunder's top 8 in minutes played missed 31 total games, or an average of less than 4 games missed each for their top 8. That is insane health.
Yeah.
It is unlikely to repeat. It doesn't mean they're due for some major injury, but I would not expect the same level of health because that is very rare.
Mm-hmm.
Second, as good as the West was this season, there's good reason to think it's going to be even better next season, and specifically the top of the West. The Grizzlies are the obvious one. They won 50-plus games 2 seasons in a row coming into the season. We're also getting a full season of this Dallas team, who were on a 57-win pace once they made those trades.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota and Denver aren't going anywhere in all likelihood. It's going to be even harder to win the number 1 seed next season.
Yeah.
And as a result of this, in my opinion, OKC's road in the playoffs is likely going to be more difficult next season than it was this season. They likely won't get a Zion-less Pelicans team in the first round. They likely won't avoid both Minnesota and Denver again in the first 2 rounds. And I think the response to this should be to try and get better, not to stand pat, run it back, and hope things play out the same because they looked so close this season. Next season is not going to be the same as this season. They'll enter the season as the team that was the number 1 seed last year. They're going to have massive expectations. They will officially go from the up-and-coming young team that surprises everyone to a team that is expected to be a top 4 seed, a team that is expected to make the second round. If you run it back, I think you have to be prepared to be disappointed. It's not that they can't succeed while running it back, but when you factor in everything, making significant moves this summer can increase their margin for error with way less risk than similar moves would affect other teams at a time when competition at the top of the West could be at an all-time high. So that is my reasons, my 5 reasons why OKC should be aggressive this summer. And again, this doesn't mean trading for a LeBron, okay? And I'm not talking about trading for a LeBron. I'm talking about trading for rotation players, guys who you're expecting to play 20 to 30 minutes per night, whoever that is, whatever position that might be, fundamentally altering the rotation to make it better, moving other players lower in your pecking order. That is what I'm talking about. Now, I'm still open to the big moves, obviously. We've talked about Kevin Durant. But I just think this is an incredible opportunity for this team to be aggressive in a way that won't really hurt them, or at least won't hurt them as much as it would hurt other teams. And so I think yes, it's always true that, like, yeah, maybe the guy's not out there. You know, maybe the perfect trade isn't out there. They have so much flexibility. I don't want them to like miss out on an opportunity because everything has to be just so. Like, we have to get the absolute perfect player. We can't risk getting someone who does 80% of the things we want, but that 20% is just a little bit off. I would rather them take the chance because they have the opportunity. They could get off of, if they could get off whatever contract they get, you know, like whatever guy they brought in, they could move him really easily next summer if it totally failed. I would just rather them take a risk to try to increase those championship odds because of this unique situation. So that's my pitch.
I mean, I think they will do this. I think the things that you're saying will happen.
You're a Mr. Run It Back. You've been talking running it back this whole time.
I mean, run it back with like your core plus like whatever opportunities come available to you. Like, I'm not saying like you should just sit on your hands. Like, everything's great. Everything's perfect. Don't do anything. But like, there's a reason why they traded for Gordon Hayward to acquire that cap space is like so that you can have the flexibility to make moves this summer. I think that like people, there's somebody in the chat that keeps mentioning OG Ananobi. Like it's not going to be OG Ananobi. Like I can say that with like pretty profound certainty that it's not going to be OG for
And listen, as someone
a
who
host of reasons.
likes OG Anunoby, someone who brought him up at the trade deadline,
Mm-hmm.
like I do not want to be the team that pays his next contract, because if you are getting OG Anunoby on your team, you're paying him $40+ million a year for a guy who, let me just read you how many games he's played.
Yeah.
This year, 50. The season before that, 67. Season before that, 48. Season before that, 43. Like this is not. I love OG Anunoby, and at his best and healthy, he would be really great on the Thunder. He would plug a lot of holes
Mm-hmm.
in a way that would be awesome. I don't know if I'm willing to give him the kind of deal you would have to do to get him to come to Oklahoma City, leaving aside like all the other stuff we know
There's a lot
about.
of
Like,
stuff. There's a
yeah.
lot of stuff. There's a lot of layers to it, and also he's a free.
Also, he's staying in New York.
He's a free agent. Like he's not. And I hate to just say this to everybody because it just still hurts, but like he's a max level free agent. That is, those guys don't come knocking on the Thunder's door.
Well, besides that, I'll tell you what is happening right now. When that trade was made, this report came out that he was willing to go to New York for less money.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that he is now doing damage control on that by trying to leak that he has all of these suitors, or that he's more willing to leave New York so that he can get an actual big payday from New York.
100%. Yeah. He's gonna.
He always has wanted to go to New York. That's what he's always said. And whatever that was, I don't know if it was a report or a direct quote about like him being willing to play for less in New York.
Yeah.
Obviously, it wasn't what he should have said or should have leaked. Whoever leaked that from his camp. And I think they're playing damage control now. And that's why you're seeing all of these like Jake Fisher had that rumor, like executives think that there might actually be a chance that OG leaves.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not buying it. If he did leave, it would be Philly doesn't get Paul George and they just give an insane bag to OG. That's the only way I can see OG leaving New York.
Well, and like everybody knows who his agent is. It's Sam Rose.
Yes, it's Sam Rose. It's Leon Rose's son.
So like come on, guys. Like
he's just trying to get more money from the Knicks.
Yeah, don't believe that. I mean, that OG rumor was just like dead on arrival. Like
it's just not believable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just not true. Also, it's just like flat out false.
I'll say that I think Paul George has done a better job of making me feel like, ooh, maybe Paul George will leave. Maybe he would go to the Sixers. I still don't totally believe it, because it's like, man, that guy wanted to get to LA so bad. His family's in LA. Like he's started this like podcast career. Like he doesn't want to leave LA.
No.
But I think he's done a better job of through these leaks of convincing me that, oh, maybe there would be a chance that he would, if he doesn't get a max deal from the Clippers, that he might actually leave.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the Thunder, if they can make a deal, one, it's got to be approved through ownership to like spend, at a high level right now. But dealing for somebody that has a year or two left on their contract makes a ton of sense, right now, and you let them expire, or if they're a better fit than one of your younger guys that gets us an extension, then like you can make other deals. Like I do think like there is opportunity that exists there. It just has to be for the right kind of guys, and not that guys have to be perfect, because that's the thing. And I think you're right. Like you can select the guys like that you think fit like more perfectly with your team through the draft. I think it's harder to do that with trade, because like these are fully formed players now, that have agendas, that have all these things going on. It's just harder to find like the exact perfect guy, to come into your team. So they're going to be imperfect. They're going to have flaws.
A lot of times it's like do we think we can mold this guy? Like, if you looked at the player that Aaron Gordon was in Orlando, and I
Yeah,
know a lot of people when they made that deal were like, "Oh, he's going to be perfect for Denver," but it required him playing such a different way than he played in
yeah,
Orlando. I mean, he
yeah.
does not look like that player, you know?
Well, and
And
it
so
also and Sam talked about this today. It required Jokic to be like fully bought into Denver too, because like Aaron Gordon's talked about this a lot. How like the reason that that he has become an unselfish player is because he saw all of those qualities in Jokic, you
yeah.
know, and how like and Sam talked about this when we talked about SGA today. I thought everything he said about Shea was really good, but that like the relationship between Shea and the Thunder has to almost be like a marriage, like for better for worse. He talked about how he talked about like the qualities that Shea possesses, and like they just need to basically commit to one another. And like the reason that Denver works is because Jokic is like fully committed, in Denver. And so I think like all that is a part of this too, is like a part of this equation. And like it makes you wonder a little bit about like them being unable to acquire guys like Pau Gasol, you know, like did Pau like get the inkling that like maybe this was not going to be something that was going to stay together long term, when he talked about, talking about the Thunder. Um, I don't know that to be true. That's just conjecture, but like I think being bought in and like setting an example, like especially for like new guys coming in, I think is kind of crucial to like the formation of the team. And so you like if Shea is, and like there's no inclination that he's not, but like if Shea's fully bought in, it may probably makes it easier for guys.
Yeah.
Um Noah Fulmer says Clay Thompson. Like, oh my gosh. Like we don't have to do this. Like those are the things like we don't have to do, you
Yeah,
know.
I would not be into that.
Not
Clay
saying
would
that Noah,
Clay
he said ESPN is saying this potentially. I mean, just like, come on, guys. Like, did everybody watch Clay this summer? Like, one, he's going to be like super overpaid this summer,
yeah.
and he's going to be locked into a deal that could be damaging to your team. You know?
And the thing was, like, for long stretches of that Warriors season, you can't even say like, well, he'll have a smaller role when he comes to OKC. Like he had a smaller role as that season went on
Yeah,
for the Warriors.
yeah,
Like, I, yeah, he would not be a player I'd be interested in
yeah.
at
There's no
all.
way. Like a theoretical Clay Thompson, like absolutely, yeah. Like
I'll,
this
I'll
bigger.
I'll say right now, like in terms of free agency, like there are very few guys who I'd be willing to pay because most of the good players you're going to have to give like a 4-year deal
Yeah,
to. Like I'm much more thinking about trades, and I'm much more thinking about guys who are on 2-year deals or maybe 3-year deals with a team option, or maybe it's not fully guaranteed in the third year. Like those are the guys I'd be more interested in,
yeah,
unless they are just like absolute perfect fit stars kind of guys where like you're getting them and they're locked in. Like yeah, those kind of deals whenever those come along.
yeah,
But more realistically, I'm thinking trades and guys on shorter term deals.
yeah. I think that's the only way because like if somebody may bring up Malik Monk, great. Like Malik Monk's probably not going to want anything less than 3 years. And if he does, it's going to be like this like giant balloon payment to him where he's making like 2 years, 50 million or something.
Yeah, I mean he could easily get the Van Vliet deal from a team.
Yeah. And it's
That
just like,
wouldn't shock
you
me.
don't want to do that. And then it's okay, well, who's next on this list that is an unrestricted free agent? Like the Thunder want to throw a bunch of money at KCP. Like he's going to be overpaid, and KCP is probably like, I want the years, or the big balloon payment.
Yeah.
And like he's probably not a guy that's big enough like, to make like a difference on this team. Like you want like a 6'8", 6'9" guy. Like you don't need another shooting guard sized player on this team. Okay, well let's pass on that. Like let's Buddy Hield can shoot it. Like no, no, thank you.
Yeah, those type of guys. I mean, we saw it in this year's playoffs, and maybe Clay falls into that bucket now too. Like
hmm
when you can only really offer shooting, it's
Yeah,
really hard for you to stay on the court in the playoffs. Like
it's
Buddy
really
Hield had that one game. It was great. It was a lot of fun, but he didn't do anything for the rest of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
You look at some of the other guys in that mold, and I just think it's harder and harder because you're going to be getting targeted on one end. They know you can't really attack a closeout on the other end. You just become very one dimensional, and that's just definitely not what the Thunder need.
Mm-mm.
I mean, it'd be great to have more shooting, but we saw in that series, like sometimes the shot's not there, and you have to be able to do something else with the ball.
Yeah, without a doubt. Hey, my guy Royce O'Neal.
Oh my god, when you said Royce O'Neal, in my head, I thought you were saying Royce White.
Hey, my guy Royce White. Bring him back. Bring him back. No.
The Suns are about to go as deep as they can into the second apron to pay Royce O'Neal.
Hey, Gordon Hayward, 45th on Hoops Hype list.
Really?
Shoot past dribble.
Who's he around? Who's 46?
44 is Kevin Love.
Okay.
45's Gordo. 46
Yeah.
is Precious Achua. 47 is Alec Burks.
Oh, interesting.
Prince. Lonnie Walker. He's in that range.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
yeah. Don't meet me with like free agency lists because there's just like not many guys on here that are actually helpful. I do think like trying to put together like a list, and maybe that's what we do. I mean, we got some off-season pods coming up. Maybe next week we can actually look
we
at.
got like at least a month.
Yeah, we'll talk draft. We'll talk. That'll be our assignment for next week. Let's put together a list of players that we can actually talk about that have 1 or 2 years left on their contract that makes sense via trade for the Thunder. And part of the reason why I said Markkanen's like probably not on the list is like I think that they want to give him an extension.
Oh, the Jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see.
They give him the extension, and it's just like off it. I mean, it's off the table.
Well, yeah, but I need to see what they're doing first.
Utah,
because like I don't think they're just giving him an extension and running it back. Like I think they have to be more aggressive at some point.
yeah, but like if you are going to be aggressive, like you kind of have to have Lowry there.
Yeah, I agree with that. But they're so far away.
Oh, I know. I honestly like think their plan stinks because like how do you what they're counting on is like acquiring a star player via trade, basically, because they're not using the draft to do it because they're just perpetually drafting 9th.
Yeah,
and like that is
tough
like,
to do.
That's no way to build a team. That is like how to like if there was an instruction booklet made about how to get yourself stuck in the middle, Danny Ainge is like following it to a T right now. It's really not good. It's really, really not good. And then they tank at the end of the year 2 years in a row just to get the 9th pick.
I know.
It's like
I would be a little confused if I was a Jazz fan.
I'd be furious.
I just want to know what the plan is.
Yeah, and not that like this draft is something to get furious about. Like it's
no.
Like not like you missed out on anything, but it's also just like shows like a lack of like real like what a real plan is. Like they're picking 10th, in a draft that I think is really flat. But like next year, if I'm them next year, it's like you better find a way to tank next year because like that is
you have to.
That's the path to Utah becoming like a good team again. It's like find a way to tank next year.
I mean, the only team that will be obviously worse than them, I think, is Portland in the West. Like that next spot is wide open.
Yeah, I know. And they still like they have found ways to overachieve where it's like, oh, look how good this is. Good job, Jazz. And then like the West is too good. Like if they were in the East, they'd be in the playoffs. They'd be the Pacers in the East. In the West, like they've just screwed themselves over and over again. But the problem is too, like you're not just competing for lottery spots with Western Conference teams; it's with Eastern Conference teams too. Which the lottery is just littered. It's littered.
Littered.
Oh man.
All right, Andrew. I have to go to bed. So do you. It's 1 a.m.
I do too. 1 a.m. All right. Thanks so much for listening to this show. We'll have another podcast. It's gonna be another Thursday, Friday pod. So be ready for a Thursday pod on a Friday. And we'll talk to you guys again on Thursday.